Well, hello and thank you for joining me for another iTWire.com and Alex on Tech video. I'm joined today by the Associate Director of Solutions and Services at SoftBank Robotics, Chris Chiofalo. Welcome to the program.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
So look, before we get into more detail about all the different robots, can you please just remind us briefly about the incredible achievements at SoftBank, which is the parent company of SoftBank Robotics?
Yeah, so SoftBank Group has been an incredibly innovative company. Wherever they've focused their eye in technology sector or the telco sector, they've driven success through innovation. And being a subsidiary of that, as SoftBank Robotics, we're super excited to carry that same journey and mantra down into the robotics world, and particularly across Asia Pacific and particularly here in Australia.
Yes, well, I mean, SoftBank owns ARM, for example, which is about to sell to NVIDIA for $40 billion, and has been involved in so many different things over the years. But one of the things that people would know SoftBank Robotics for is a robot called Pepper, which launched in 2014 as the humanoid and programmable robot. If people do a search for SoftBank Robotics Pepper in Google, they'll see this robot, and I've seen this particular style of robot cloned at trade shows across the world. Seems to have been a great template to copy, and from Chinese robot makers and more. How is Pepper going in 2020?
Yeah, Pepper's an amazing robot. It continues to sell. You're seeing it more and more present in the media now, particularly in the times that we're experiencing. When it comes to companies copying Pepper, particularly in China, look, when you're such an innovator or a leader, you're always going to have businesses try and ride on the back of your success. But because we drive so much innovation, not just into Pepper, but into any robot that we have, we're too busy looking in front of us to look behind. So what's going on in China at the moment, I'm glad you've got some insight into. Maybe you can educate me a little bit later, but I haven't had a chance to keep on track on it.
Look, when I was at CES Asia last year or the year before, there were a bunch of different companies with robots, and they had screens on the front of their chest area, and they were on wheels, and they all looked very similar to Pepper. That I've even seen on Kickstarter little small versions, and I even saw a picture of a Pepper style robot holding a Dyson vacuum cleaner, and which I don't know how practical that is, but look, how did you get into robotics yourself? Were you a big fan of Isaac Asimov and his robot series like I was as a child? Was it the robots from sci-fi TV shows or movies? And what sparked your love of robotics and technology?
Yeah, so no, it wasn't the sci-fi fiction, a little bit like your experience. If I was to put it down to anything, I would say it would be along the lines of Star Wars. I mean, many people today comment about, and you might see our Whiz running in the background, by the way, the look of Whiz and how it could compare to R2-D2 and how Pepper could compare to C-3PO. So I think the team and myself every day is super thankful we get to work with kind of such futuristic technology, and it does draw, memories back to Star Wars days. However, my career at SoftBank wasn't so dream-like. Basically, I followed technology. I love technology. And as I moved from on-premise to cloud to mobile apps, and starting my own business into AI, it was a natural progression at each point for me to take that step. And I see it as a natural progression now to move into robotics, and particularly with some of the things that will be coming out over the next 10 years. So whilst it's early days, I think for anyone looking for a career and was considering robotics, you're going to be getting in at the right time.
Now we're getting a closer look at Whiz in the background there, and he is billed as an autonomous AI-driven robot vacuum cleaner. Now it not only looks like a vertically much larger version of those home robot vacuum cleaners, but it, just to put on my comedic hat here for a second, it looks like it might exterminate, dust. And although given the nature of dust, it might need an army of Daleks or Dustlex. But, obviously you need a lot of whizzing around to keep things clean. But what's the story behind Whiz? And, you talk about now, obviously, with COVID, needing to keep offices and places clean. What is the story behind Whiz, and how has Whiz taken off in the post-COVID era?
Yeah, and I think for any viewers on the line, your reference was really to Doctor Who, right?
Yes, that's
And
right. Daleks. He looks a little bit like a small,
yeah,
harmless Dalek, that only wants to
very
exterminate dust and
harmless.
not humanity.
Yeah, very harmless. I mean, we put Whiz in public areas, shopping centres, malls, RSLs, leagues, clubs, wherever it may go,
Mm.
and the response kids have with it is quite phenomenal. I don't think they quite know the technology they're embracing, but yeah, it does have a different impact than those scarier robots that you referred to. I think the story behind Whiz is kind of fundamental to our conversation as SoftBank Robotics. It's really about how do we take a really simple task that's highly repetitive and help humans by automating that task. And it's as simple as that. So when it comes down to Whiz, it's a super powered autonomous robotic vacuum cleaner, and it will do, between 1,500 square meters. It will go for 3.5 hours. It's got LiDAR sensors, 3D cameras, infrared, and it takes in its entire environment to progressively and organically, after being taught with a few instructions, map and vacuum the floor.
Mm.
And this introduces scale. So not just once a day or once a week, which typically could happen. It's now every day and all the time. And we think that really addresses the new standard of COVID, which is at the forefront of everyone's mind, whether you're a customer, a consumer, an employee, a parent. You now have a new expectation of what it is to have a clean environment. And so Whiz is fitting perfectly into this conversation to help us take up that battle and to help us deliver a higher standard of cleaning.
Does Whiz have any upgrades in future that will allow it to spray, antibacterial and antiviral liquids to mop up as well as vacuum?
Yeah, I love that question. I really, really love that question. And I can't say everything about that to answer that honestly. Sure. So maybe you could tell a bit from my reaction. I think that core to us at SoftBank Robotics is to help humans. Mm-hmm. And part of that conversation is helping battle COVID. And one interesting topic as well is how can we also use our amazing unit, our amazing robot, to help other companies battle COVID, whether that would be through add-ons in the scheme of what you refer to, sprayers, disinfectants, UV lights, UVC lights, all those conversations are very interesting to us at SoftBank Robotics Australia, for sure.
And, I've heard over the past few years of the term of cobot, like a robot that, is a co-worker, and it's called Cobotics. And SoftBank Robotics says that, you're working to ensure that humans and robots can live and work together. So, what more can you tell us about Cobotics and perhaps, although I suppose you can't say, but what sort of robots you have planned for the future?
Yeah, Cobotics, not to be confused with probiotics, which sometimes gets interchanged with conversations with my friends or family.
Sure.
And Cobots is about, basically robotics augmenting our life, assisting us with complicated tasks and helping us add value. So working together. Once again, I can't say a lot about what's in the pipeline.
Sure.
But there's a lot of investment coming into the pipeline from our business. And what is really interesting to us is, let's say vacuuming carpet. So a very simple task that's highly repetitive with a tool or a robot like Whiz. Mm-hmm. Things that would extend in a similar nature to solve very similar problems, hard floor, soft floor, outdoors, indoors. And so all those problems we find super interesting, and we've got a really, really smart team working on solving them. Yeah.
Now, one of the things people always worry about with robots is the ethics of robots. Asimov famously had his 3 laws, which actually turned into a 0th law, where the robots decided that they almost had to disappear because they were worried that they were going to be affecting humanity too much, and almost became like invisible gods if you read a lot of Asimov's stories. And we also have the stories, and probably this is spoiling things for people, but there's a famous story called With Folded Hands, where robots came to this particular planet, and at first they were very helpful, but in the end, they were trying to protect humans from doing anything dangerous. So all the humans could do was sit there with folded hands. And I also saw a video a couple of years ago, which you've probably seen. I think it was of Chinese kids in some sort of shopping mall where they were sort of terrorizing this robot, that was in the shopping mall to sort of help customers, and the robot was trying to obviously be very careful around these kids, and the kids were sort of cornering it and playing with it, so and teasing it, as I guess only as kids can do. So how difficult is this whole ethics question, and will we ever have the 3 laws of robotics programmed in if such a thing isn't already in the programming?
Yeah. The ethics question, and whilst I do have a fundamental background or basic background in philosophy, I know enough about these ethics questions to know that it's a very, very, it's a rabbit hole, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of hearsay and a lot of thinking and a lot of sci-fi that does come into play. And those books and those 3 laws, they make for really, really great sci-fi stories. Mm. How they work into practice in everyday life, I'm not quite sure. But what I think is really important is the culture and the ethics of the teams that do build the robots and the purpose of building those robots. And that's fundamental. And, we take that very, very seriously here. And we always keep in mind the problem of solving simple, basic tasks that help better humans, whether that's saving their back from always picking up a HVAC vacuum cleaner or bending over to vacuum the carpet. I mean, that's fundamental to us. What that conversation would look like in 50, 100 years when the robot may, be able to communicate better than a human, I think only time could tell. And, we'll let sci-fi continue to tell the story as it has for the last, 100 years. And, none of that's really come to fruition.
Well, certainly not yet. I mean, robots are, and AI and all these things are having difficulty with the simplest of things, and our imaginations can run away with us. I mean, we see a similar sort of ethical question with self-driving autonomous cars. The well-known question is that if a bunch of kids run on the road and the car has to take evasive action, does the car and somebody has to die? Is that the kids on the road, or is it you when the car smashes into a wall? And it's sort of an unfair question in a way because it presupposes there's no third option. But these are the ethical questions that people have to deal with. And, well, like you say, I mean, it comes down to the people that are programming it and their values and morals. And, well, I've only met you electronically so far, but I'm glad you're part of the team. You look like...
Yeah, and I too, I love tuning into those conferences and watching them on stage, and the if and the not, and what is morality and what does that look like in a line of code, and how should we consider that, and does it really come down to the engineer that's writing the code, or do we need philosophy groups and steering committees? Yeah, I love all that stuff. But it's just it's just talk about science fiction and interesting to watch on YouTube at the moment for me.
Yeah, it's not real yet. So just before I like to sort of finish on some questions about the future and things, but can you tell us briefly, if somebody wants to get Whiz, what's the approximate price of Whiz? How do they get in contact with you to get a Whiz into their offices or their airports, into the CBD of Sydney or anywhere around the world?
Yeah, so we're launching here in Australia. We're working locally with partners to discover the best go-to-market, resellers, distributors, and how Whiz fits into that market with including pricing. Mm-hmm. We've distributed, Whiz globally around the world. I think the last stat was that it's gone around the world almost 11 times. There's 11,000 plus Whizzes. It's solving big problems everywhere for every company. So basically, as we launch this business in Australia, we'll be building out local channels, local vendors, local support networks to make sure that we can help every business move and shift to robotics in a way that they're comfortable with, whether that's their local distributor or whether that's engaging directly with new partners or industries that are going to spin up off the back of our robotics, which is a great journey. And we have a young team that just got out of university. They're working on how to best bring this Whiz to our environments in Australia with really senior experience sitting over the top, guiding us down the right channels and the right directions. So that's our launch in Australia in a nutshell.
Sure. And all those university students are familiar with all the sci-fi movies and Terminators and all the rest. So just quickly, when did SoftBank Robotics launch in Australia?
Yeah, officially we were setting up the business probably about 12 months ago to today, but officially we started bringing Whiz into the country and starting to move it into early stage customers in March.
Okay.
Working with them, getting their feedback. So it's still very early days for our business here. Japan is a lot more mature, as you would know, when it comes to robotics. They've been moving there a lot longer. The US, in turn, was about 3 months later. Europe was soon to follow. And then we started moving the Asia-Pacific business, Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia, Korea, just in the last 3 to 6 months.
Sure. And so, look, I like to finish with some questions. I sort of have three standard questions. One is about the future. And, when do you predict a true Rosie the Robot type of, home helper to genuinely help people in everyday life? We've seen for years that the Japanese have been wanting to create robots to help with their aging population, is this 20 years away? You mentioned 50 or 100 years. How long before we have an android that helps us like in the movie iRobot without going crazy?
Yeah. If I remember correctly, Rosie the Robot wasn't always that helpful. Like, it had a few
issues.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's issues. I don't know if that's the robot that we would aim for. Definitely at SoftBank Robotics. But I think to your question or your point, it's if you look at the iPhone, it's been around for 8 years and it was a big innovation or a leap forward, and then it's taken, I probably longer. Sorry,
2007.
Taken a long time.
Yeah.
2007. Yeah, 13 years. So taken a lot longer to take it and refine it, but not really move the phone forward in leaps and bounds.
Still a rectangle.
I think, it's still a rectangle with a screen. It's a little bit brighter. Yeah, exactly. And so I think we'll see the same in robotics. I think we'll see an initial flood of the market, and I think we'll see heavy investment move in, and I think we'll see some consolidation. How we get to this agile Rosie the Robot of the Jetsons, definitely not on this side of, to me, 2050 for sure. Yeah.
So in that case, what do you think we can see with robots in the next decade by 2030?
Yeah, and I think I kind of touched on a little bit as I spoke about my career and where I moved at critical times from on-premise to cloud. I think robotics is definitely there at the point where 2010, 2020, we saw the growth of Silicon Valley, huge IPOs, big tech investments.
Yeah.
I think software and AI, software in particular, not necessarily AI, software is there's only so many more web apps you can build, so many more problems you can solve in the browser. I think we're going to move into a heavy AI environment. And as manufacturing becomes cheaper, supply lines become more accessible, we're going to see a flood of entrepreneurs in the next 10 years with investment, solving problems and bringing robots to everyday people at a cheaper rate and a faster rate. So I definitely see an acceleration of the robotics culture, entrepreneurs around robotics, startup around robotics in the next 10 years. Yeah.
And of course, we do have robots in homes today and have had for the past few years with the robot vacuum cleaners and robotic lawn mowers. So, it's not as if they don't actually exist. It's just that they're still very primitive compared to what we've dreamt up in science fiction and what is yet to come and to be innovated on by all those startups.
Yeah, and to your point, they also exist very predominantly at a level that's not typically accessible by the general public or the small businesses. Flying airplanes, right? Warehousing, manufacturing. Yeah, so it's there. It's been automating for, tens of years. However, the production line has been so expensive, people like you and me could never really, have a robotic vacuum cleaner in our office or, at our home. So we're going to see a big growth in that in the next 10 years.
Yeah, and in one sense, the iPhones that we have today are the AI brains of the robots of tomorrow. Apple might one day have some sort of a robot that has got the same chip as in your iPhone. So, we're yet to see. So, look, my second last question is always to simply ask if you can please share the best piece of advice you've received in life to help you get where you are today.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a tough one. Well, I've been working in technology my whole career, and the one piece of advice actually my business partner at the time used to tell me was, when something would go wrong with our app or our business, he used to always say to me, "Don't worry, everything is solvable. We can solve any problem." He also used to say, "Computer's never wrong." Particularly when you're writing like a line of code and you're like, "No, I'm getting an error." No, computer's never wrong, and we can solve any problem. And I always have gravitated towards companies that have that ambition, because as a career, as a learning, or anybody that's around you that's being driven by that ambition, it's super motivating. And as a consequence or a benefit, you too will go along with that vision.
Well, that's good advice. So, what is your final message to iTWire viewers and readers, and to your current and future customers, partners, and robots?
Yeah. So first and foremost, Alex, thanks for having us on. We are super excited to be in Australia now, starting to tell our story. For our customers that would watch this, thank you for joining our business very early on as we launch, and also taking a leap of faith and transitioning your business at the right time, so you can then differentiate yourself from your other businesses. And we want to follow that journey with you in the next 5 years. To future customers and partners, we look forward to the next 5, 10, whatever years, helping you transform your business into a cobiotic environment or cobot environment. And the last kind of advice to the robots in our fleet and the ones that we'll see in the future is thank you for, stepping in and helping out and, being part of us transitioning. So, yeah.
Well, they're part of our future, whether we want it or not, as long as we don't blow ourselves up in some sort of economic or nuclear catastrophe first. And I have faith in humanity that we won't do that. And that the
That's
best
a different discussion.
It is. But I think the best is always yet to come.
I love that one.
You're part of helping to make that happen. So thank you very much. And I hope we can talk again in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. I look forward to talking in the future.